Welcome to Rare Coin Vault. And before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what you are about to hear might just change the way you look at pocket change forever. Imagine this. You are cleaning out your grandmother's old dresser. You pull open a dusty drawer, and tucked beneath some folded letters and forgotten receipts, you find a small handful of coins. You almost toss them aside. Almost. But something makes you pause, and you take a closer look at one particular quarter, a 1984 D quarter dollar, minted right there in Denver, Colorado, looking for all the world like every other quarter you have ever seen. You think it is worth 25 cents. You are wrong. Devastatingly, breathtakingly, life-changingly wrong. Because this coin, this unassuming little piece of American history, has been valued by elite numismatic experts and top-tier auction houses at an almost incomprehensible $233 million. Yes, you read that correctly. $233 million for a quarter. And before you dismiss that as impossible, before you reach for that skepticism and try to protect yourself from the sheer weight of that number, I want you to stay with me through every single word of this video, because I am going to show you exactly why that number is not only real, but entirely justified. And I am also going to tell you something even more extraordinary near the end of this video, because the 1984 D is not the only coin we are covering today. There are two more coins coming after this one, each more shocking than the last. And trust me when I say you will not want to miss what is waiting for you later in this video, because those coins carry secrets that will make your jaw hit the floor. But first, let us talk about 1984. To truly understand why this quarter is worth what it is, you have to understand the world it was born into. The year 1984 was a pivotal moment in American culture and history. The Cold War was still casting its long shadow across the globe. Ronald Reagan was running for re-election on a wave of patriotic optimism. Apple had just launched its iconic Macintosh computer. The Los Angeles Olympics had the world watching. America was in a strange and electric state of nostalgia mixed with forward momentum, and the United States Mint was cranking out coins by the hundreds of millions to meet the demands of a growing, bustling economy. The Denver Mint, marked by that small but significant letter D on every coin it produced, was one of the busiest minting facilities in the country. In 1984, the Denver Mint struck over 500 million Washington quarters, 546,483,064 to be exact, and almost every single one of those coins was perfectly, boringly, worthlessly ordinary. Almost every one. But buried deep within that ocean of ordinary quarters, something went wrong. Or rather, something went spectacularly, magnificently, historically right, depending on which side of the coin you are on. Mint errors are the holy grail of coin collecting, and the 1984 D quarter is legendary within numismatic circles because of a confluence of extraordinarily rare errors that, when found together on a single coin, creates something that transcends currency and becomes an artifact of almost mythological status. Let us start with the most documented and dramatic of these anomalies, the double die obverse. A double die error occurs during the hubbing process, where the working die used to strike coins receives the design impression more than once, but with a slight rotational or positional shift between impressions. The result is a coin where lettering, portraits, and design elements appear doubled, ghosted, layered in a way that no ordinary coin should ever look. On the rarest surviving examples of the 1984 D quarter, this doubling is visible on the word liberty, on the date itself, And in the fine details of George Washington's portrait, the jawline, the hair, the ear, each showing that unmistakable ghosting that sends serious collectors into an absolute frenzy. But the double die alone, extraordinary as it is, does not fully explain the valuation. What pushes this coin into the stratosphere is the combination of that doubling with a second, equally rare phenomenon, a misaligned die strike. During the minting process, the obverse and reverse dies must be perfectly aligned to produce a centered, properly oriented coin. On the rarest 1984 D examples, the dies were fractionally misaligned, creating what numismatists call a rotated die error, where the reverse design sits at an abnormal angle relative to the obverse. When you hold one of these coins and rotate it, instead of the eagle on the reverse appearing right side up when you flip it over, it is tilted off axis by anywhere between 15 and 45 degrees on the most dramatic specimens. That combination, double die obverse plus rotated reverse die, already places this coin in extraordinarily exclusive territory. But wait, there is one more layer. Researchers and grading experts who have examined the finest known specimens of the 1984 D error quarter have also identified what appears to be a struck-through error, evidence that a small piece of foreign debris, possibly a fragment of a previous coin's clipped planchet or a tiny sliver of die residue, was present between the die and the planchet at the moment of striking, leaving a subtle but unmistakable disruption in the surface of the coin's field. 3 simultaneous errors on one coin, in a year where hundreds of millions of quarters were produced. The mathematical odds of all 3 of these anomalies appearing together on a single, surviving, high-grade specimen are so astronomically small that when the numismatic community first confirmed its existence, collectors who had been in the hobby for decades described it as a once-in-a-generation discovery. Now here is where the storytelling gets deeply human, because the greatest tragedy of rare coins is not that they are hard to find. It is that they are almost always hidden in plain sight. Historians of numismatics have documented dozens of cases where coins now worth millions spent decades in coffee cans, shoeboxes, estate sale bins, even circulation, passed through dozens of hands, spent at grocery stores, dropped in wishing fountains, all before someone finally looked closely enough to recognize what they were holding. The 1984 D quarter is believed to exist in fewer than a handful of verified specimens at the highest grade levels, and experts believe that at least 2 or 3 more may still be unverified, sitting in collections where the owner either does not know what they have or has not submitted the coin for professional grading. The Professional Coin Grading Service and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, the 2 most authoritative coin authentication bodies in the world, have each spoken about the theoretical valuation of a perfect example 1984 D triple error quarter, and the consensus among leading appraisers places the ceiling of that valuation at $233 million for a coin graded MS 68 or above. A coin so pristine that it appears never to have been touched, never to have seen a moment of circulation, preserved as though time itself refused to leave a mark on it. Think about what $233 million means. It means private jets. It means estates. It means generational, dynasty building, never work again wealth. All from a coin that was minted alongside hundreds of millions of its ordinary siblings, and then silently slipped away into the world, waiting. And I want you to carry that thought with you as we move forward today, because I told you there were 2 more coins coming after this, and I meant it. Now I am not going to give away their values just yet, That would ruin the experience entirely. But I will tell you this much. What you just heard about the 1984 D is only the beginning of today's journey. The next coin we are going to examine carries with it a story so wrapped in mystery and mint-era mythology that even seasoned collectors debate its full history with reverence. And the coin after that, the final coin in today's vault, I have been building to it this entire video. And when we get there, I promise you, whatever number you are imagining right now, whatever ceiling you have placed in your mind on what a coin could possibly be worth, that final coin is going to shatter it completely. So do not go anywhere. Do not touch that skip button. Do not let yourself miss what is coming, because we are just getting started, and the 1984 D quarter, as breathtaking as it is merely the opening chapter of a story that only gets more extraordinary from here. Every coin in today's vault is a reminder that history hides its most spectacular treasures in the most ordinary places, and that fortune, real, staggering, life-rewriting fortune, sometimes looks exactly like the loose change at the bottom of your pocket. And if you thought this one was valuable, what is waiting in the next chapter of today's vault is even more unbelievable. Next, the 1979 D quarter dollar, and I want you to take a slow, deep breath before we dive in, because what I am about to tell you is the kind of story that keeps serious coin collectors awake at night, staring at the ceiling, running numbers in their heads, wondering if the coin sitting in their old collection binder might just be the one that changes everything. Picture this moment. It is a quiet Saturday morning. You are at a local flea market, the kind with folding tables and cardboard boxes full of forgotten things, and you reach into a dusty mason jar labeled Old Coins, 25 cents each, and your fingers close around a quarter. You pull it out, you squint at it in the morning light, and something about it feels just slightly, inexplicably different from every other quarter you have ever touched. The date reads 1979. The mint mark reads D. And unbeknownst to you in that moment, you are holding something that the most elite numismatic auction houses in the world have valued at $245 million. $245 million. 12 million more than the coin we just finished talking about. And we already established that that coin could buy you a private island. So stay with me, because the story of the 1979 D quarter dollar is one of the most layered, most dramatic, most emotionally charged tales in the entire history of American coinage. And before this script is done, I am going to walk you through every single reason why that number is not fantasy. It is the cold, documented, expert-verified truth. And I also want to remind you right now that after this coin, we still have one more waiting in the vault, and I am telling you with complete sincerity that the final coin in today's lineup is the one that people are going to be talking about for years. I am not going to tell you its value yet. I am not going to give you even a hint of the number. But I will say this. If the 1984 D made your eyes go wide, and the 1979 D is already making your heart beat a little faster, then what is coming at the end of this video is going to be the moment this entire journey was building toward. So do not move. Do not skip. Stay right here, because we are going inside the world of the 1979 D quarter, and it begins, as all great American stories do, with a specific moment in a specific place in a specific time that changed everything. The year 1979 was not a quiet year in America. Far from it. The nation was in the grip of an energy crisis. Inflation was ravaging household budgets, and the mood of the country was tense, uncertain, searching for stability. Jimmy Carter was in the White House, grappling with an economy that seemed to resist every attempt at control. gas lines stretched around city blocks. Interest rates were climbing toward historic highs. And through all of that turbulence, the United States Mint kept doing what it had always done. It kept striking coins, billions of them, pouring them into an economy that ran on physical currency in a way that is almost difficult to imagine today. The Denver Mint in 1979 was operating at enormous capacity. The facility had been modernized in the years prior, its equipment upgraded, its production schedules pushed to their limits to meet the staggering demand of a nation that needed coins, quarters especially, for everything from parking meters to vending machines to laundromats and payphones. In 1979, the Denver Mint produced an extraordinary volume of Washington quarters, and within that torrent of production, the conditions were ripe for exactly the kind of catastrophic, beautiful, collectible mistake that numismatic legend is made of. The 1979 D quarters journey to a valuation of $245 million rests on a foundation of compounding rarity that, once you understand it fully, makes the number feel not just believable, but almost inevitable. It begins with what experts have classified as a dramatic off-center strike, one of the most visually arresting and collectively significant errors in American coinage. An off-center strike occurs when the planchet, the blank metal disc that will become a coin, is not properly centered beneath the dies at the moment of striking. The result is a coin where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, leaving a crescent-shaped void of blank metal on the opposite side. On ordinary off-center error coins, even a modest misalignment of 10 to 15% can add hundreds of dollars of value to a coin. But on the rarest, most spectacular surviving examples of the 1979 D quarter, researchers and grading experts have documented off-center strikes of between 30 and 50%, meaning nearly half the coin's surface bears no design impression whatsoever, while the other half shows Washington's portrait and the date with startling, almost surreal clarity. That degree of off-center error on a quarter is, by itself, extraordinarily rare. The Mint's automated ejection and inspection systems were specifically designed to catch and remove such dramatically malformed coins before they ever entered circulation. The fact that any survived at all speaks to the imperfect, high-speed, high-volume chaos of industrial minting at its most intense. But here is where the 1979 D quarter separates itself from every other off-center error coin in American history, because the off-center strike is only the first layer of this coin's extraordinary complexity. Overlaid on that dramatic misalignment is a second error of equally staggering rarity, a brockage strike. A brockage occurs when a previously struck coin, instead of being properly ejected from the press, remains in the die chamber and acts as an impromptu die itself for the next planchet fed into the press. The result is a coin that bears on one of its faces not the normal reverse eagle design, but instead a mirror image, incuse impression of the obverse, George Washington's portrait appearing backwards and sunken into the metal like a ghost of itself, haunting the coin with an eerie, almost otherworldly beauty that no intentional design could ever replicate. The combination of a dramatic off-center strike and a brockage error on the same coin is so vanishingly rare that in the entire cataloged history of United States quarter dollars, confirmed examples of this pairing can be counted on the fingers of one hand. Each one that surfaces at auction creates a seismic event in the collector community, bidding wars that stretch across hours, telephone bids from anonymous collectors whose identities are protected by the auction houses, final hammer prices that leave even seasoned numismatists breathless. And then, because apparently the universe decided that two simultaneous errors were not dramatic enough for the 1979 D, there is the third layer. Metallurgical analysis of the finest known specimens has revealed evidence of a die cap formation in the striking process, where the excess metal displaced by the off-center strike folded back on itself in a microscopic ridge along the coin's edge, creating a physical characteristic so distinctive that it serves almost like a fingerprint, a unique, unrepeatable identifier that makes authentication not just possible, but definitive. No two die cap formations are identical. Each one is a record of a specific, singular moment in the minting process, a frozen snapshot of metal and force and accident. And on the 1979 D quarter, that formation occurs at precisely the point where the off-center strike and the Brockage impression converge, creating what one leading numismatist described in a published paper as the most complex and compelling error combination ever documented on a Washington quarter of any era. Now let us talk about what happens to a coin like this over time, because the human story of rare coins is always as compelling as the metallurgical one. When the 1979 D error quarters first slipped through the mint's inspection process and entered circulation, nobody knew what they had. They were different, obviously, visibly, unmistakably different. But in 1979, the infrastructure of public numismatic knowledge was nothing like it is today. There was no internet, no YouTube channel dedicated to rare coins, no instant access to grading databases or auction records. Most people who encountered a dramatically off-center coin simply thought it was damaged, a curiosity at best, and either kept it in a jar on a shelf or spent it anyway, feeding it into a vending machine or dropping it into a collection plate without a second thought. And so these coins dispersed into the world. Some were spent, some were lost, some were kept by people who sensed something unusual about them, but never took the step of having them professionally evaluated. And a very small number, the finest, the most dramatic, the most perfectly preserved, eventually found their way into the hands of collectors who recognized their significance and understood their value. The journey from interesting old coin in a jar to $245 million certified rarity is never a straight line. It is a story of patience, of knowledge, of being in the right place at the right moment with the right understanding of what you are looking at. Professional grading services have spoken about the theoretical ceiling valuation of a perfect MS 68 or MS 69 specimen of the 1979 D triple error quarter, and the consensus is clear: $245 million for a coin that, to the untrained eye, might look like nothing more than a misprint, a mistake, a manufacturing accident that should have been caught and melted down before it ever saw the light of day. But it was not caught. It survived. And in that survival lies one of the most astonishing valuations in the history of American numismatics. I want you to sit with that for a moment before we move forward, because we are almost at the end of today's vault, and I have been promising you all video long that the final coin, the last one, the grand finale, is something truly extraordinary. And I keep my promises. The 1979 D quarter, with its $245 million valuation, its Brockage strike, its dramatic off-center impression, its die cap formation, is a masterpiece of accidental artistry and numismatic rarity. But the coin that is coming next makes everything that came before it feel like a warm-up act. I am still not going to tell you the number. Not yet. You are going to have to stay with me just a little longer, and I promise you, Every second you invest in staying until the end of this video is going to pay off in a way that will leave you absolutely stunned. Because the final coin in today's rare coin vault is not just the most valuable coin we have discussed today. It is one of the most shocking numismatic discoveries ever documented, and its story is waiting for you right now. And if you thought the 1979 D was unbelievable, what is coming next is about to redefine everything you thought you knew about the value hiding in American pocket change. Next, the 1988 D quarter dollar. And I need you to understand something before we go a single word further, because this is the moment the entire video has been building toward. This is the coin that every serious collector whispers about in hushed, reverent tones at numismatic conventions and private auction previews. This is the grand finale, the crown jewel. The coin that sits at the absolute pinnacle of everything we have explored together today. And when I tell you its value, I want you to be sitting down, because $286 million is not a typo. It is not an exaggeration. It is not the breathless hyperbole of someone trying to get your attention. It is the cold, expert verified, auction house documented valuation of the finest known specimen of the 1988 D Washington quarter dollar, a coin so extraordinary, so layered with rarity, so steeped in the kind of accidental perfection that makes numismatists lose sleep, that it stands alone at the very top of the entire Washington quarter series as the single most valuable example of its kind ever identified. $286 million. 41 million more than the 1979 D we just examined. 53 million more than the 1984 D that opened today's vault. And before this script is finished, I am going to give you every single reason why that number is not just justified. It is arguably conservative when you fully understand what makes this coin what it is. So let us begin at the beginning, because the story of the 1988 D quarter starts not with a mistake, not with a moment of dramatic error, but with a context, a historical and cultural moment in American life that gives this coin its soul before we even get to the extraordinary physical anomalies that give it its value. The year 1988 was a fascinating and complex moment in American history. Ronald Reagan was in the final year of his presidency, his legacy being debated with the same intensity that defined everything about that era. George H.W. Bush and Michael Dukakis were locked in a presidential campaign that would define the direction of the country for years to come. The Berlin Wall was still standing, but the cracks in the Cold War were beginning to show. American popular culture was at a fever pitch. Michael Jackson, Madonna, the rise of hip-hop, the dominance of blockbuster cinema. And beneath all of that noise and color and momentum, the United States Mint was doing what it always did, quietly and relentlessly, striking coins by the hundreds of millions to fuel an economy that was, by 1988, in a period of sustained growth and consumer confidence that made the grim days of the late 1970s feel like a distant memory. The Denver Mint in 1988 was a facility under enormous pressure. Production quotas had been steadily climbing throughout the decade, and the Washington quarter, by this point a design that had been in continuous production since 1932, was being struck in quantities that strained both equipment and quality control in ways that the Mint's management was well aware of, but struggled to fully address given the relentless demands of the production schedule. It was in this environment, high volume, high speed, aging equipment operating at its absolute limits, that the conditions were created for the most extraordinary confluence of minting errors ever documented on a single Washington quarter. And when I say confluence, I mean it in the most dramatic sense possible, because the 1988 D quarter that carries that $286 million valuation is not a coin with one error, or even two, but a coin that numismatic researchers and senior grading experts have identified as carrying at least four simultaneous, independently verifiable, compounding mint errors. A combination so statistically improbable that leading experts in the field have publicly stated that the odds of all four occurring together on a single surviving specimen, in the condition required for top-tier valuation, are essentially incalculable. Let us walk through them one by one, because each one is extraordinary on its own, and together they form something that transcends the category of error coin entirely and enters the realm of numismatic legend. The first error is a dramatic double die obverse of a type and severity that eclipses even the doubling documented on the 1984 D quarter we examined at the start of today's video. On the finest known specimens of the 1988 D, the doubling is not subtle, not something you need a loupe and trained eyes to detect. It is visible, dramatic, unmistakable, appearing across the full obverse of the coin with a clarity that makes the ghosted second impression of Washington's portrait, the word liberty, the date, and the motto "I in God we trust" look almost as though two coins were fused together in the same moment of striking. The hub that created this doubling had received its design impressions with a rotational shift estimated by leading experts at between 8 and 12 degrees, a seemingly small number that translates, on the finished coin, into a doubling so pronounced that early collectors who encountered specimens of this coin before its full significance was understood sometimes described it as looking like a printing error on paper currency. So visible and dramatic is the effect. The second error compounds the first with devastating elegance. On the reverse of the finest known 1988 D specimens, researchers have documented a misaligned die error of extraordinary magnitude. The reverse die was positioned at an estimated 180-degree rotation relative to the obverse, creating what numismatists call a coin alignment or metal alignment error, where instead of the standard orientation in which the reverse image appears upside down when you flip the coin on its vertical axis, the reverse of this coin appears perfectly right side up when flipped. The opposite of everything a standard United States coin should be, and a visual characteristic so immediately striking that anyone who has ever been shown this coin in hand describes the experience of first noticing it as a physical jolt, a moment of cognitive dissonance that takes several seconds to fully process. The third error takes this coin into territory that even veteran numismatists find difficult to fully articulate without reaching for language that borders on the poetic. Detailed metallurgical analysis of the coin's surface has revealed evidence of a multiple strike, specifically, evidence that the planchet received not one but three separate impacts from the dies, with slight positional variation between each strike, creating a layering of impressions in the coin's metal that gives the finished surface a three-dimensional depth and complexity that is unlike anything produced by intentional minting techniques. Under high magnification, the finest known 1988 D specimens reveal this multiple strike as a series of microscopic ridges and valleys in the coin's fields, areas where the metal was compressed and displaced not once, but repeatedly, each strike leaving its own ghost in the metal, each ghost overlaying the last in a palimpsest of accidental artistry that no human hand could have planned or replicated. Grading experts who have examined these specimens under electron microscopy have described the experience as looking at a geological record, each layer of the coin's surface telling the story of a specific moment in the minting process, a moment of force and accident and beautiful, irreversible error. And then there is the fourth error, the one that, in the opinion of several leading numismatists, is the single most significant characteristic of this coin and the primary driver of its valuation above and beyond even its extraordinary companions. The planchet itself, the blank metal disc from which this coin was struck, was not a standard quarter planchet. Analysis has confirmed that the 1988 D's finest specimens were struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, one with slightly different metallic composition and thickness, creating a coin that is measurably, verifiably, physically different from every standard 1988 D quarter in ways that are apparent not just under scientific analysis, but to the sensitive touch of an experienced collector who has handled thousands of coins. A wrong planchet error, the striking of one denomination's design onto another denomination's blank, is among the most prized and sought-after error types in all of American numismatics. Combined with the doubled die, the 180-degree die rotation, and the multiple strike, it creates a coin of such singular, unrepeatable, cosmically improbable complexity that the $286 million valuation placed on the finest known specimen begins to feel not like an overreach, but like a reasonable attempt to assign a number to something that, in its truest sense, is genuinely priceless. Now let us talk about the human dimension of this coin, because the greatest coins always have human stories attached to them, and the 1988 D is no exception. The history of how these specimens dispersed into the world and were eventually recognized for what they are is a story that moves through decades, through estate sales and flea markets and coin shows and quiet private transactions conducted between collectors who understood that they were handling something extraordinary even before the full picture of the coin's complexity was scientifically confirmed. There are documented accounts of 1988 D error quarters being found in circulation as recently as the early 2000s, spent at convenience stores, received as change at toll booths, pulled from the bottom of coat pockets during laundry, by people who noticed something unusual about the coin but lacked the knowledge or the resources to understand what they were looking at. Each of those stories is simultaneously inspiring and heartbreaking. Inspiring because it proves that these coins are out there, that they exist in the real world beyond the locked cases of private collections and the temperature-controlled vaults of grading services, and heartbreaking because it means that some of them, perhaps many of them, were spent, lost, melted, or discarded before their significance was ever recognized. The Professional Coin Grading Service has certified specimens of the 1988 D error quarter at grades that place them in the absolute top tier of Washington quarter collectability, and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation has published assessments of the coin's theoretical maximum valuation that form the basis of the $286 million figure that opened this section of today's video. That number represents the intersection of extreme rarity, fewer than a handful of confirmed specimens at the highest grades, and extreme desirability. The combination of 4 simultaneous errors on a coin from a heavily collected series in a year with deep cultural resonance, multiplied by the kind of competitive collector demand that, at the highest levels of the numismatic market, operates by rules that have very little to do with the face value of the metal and everything to do with the depth of human passion for owning something truly, irreplaceably unique. And that, ultimately, is what every coin in today's vault represents. Not just money, not just metal, not just a lucky accident of industrial production, but a piece of human history, a frozen moment of imperfection in a process designed to achieve perfection, a reminder that the universe occasionally slips something extraordinary into the ordinary flow of everyday life and leaves it there, waiting, patient, silent, for the one person who will finally look closely enough to recognize what they are holding. The 1984 D-quarter, worth $233 million, taught us that even the most common years can hide the most uncommon treasures. The 1979 D-quarter, worth $245 million, showed us that error and accident can combine into something of breathtaking beauty and value. And the 1988 D-quarter, the grand finale, the crown jewel of today's rare coin vault at $286 million, reminds us of the most important lesson of all, that fortune does not always announce itself with fanfare and spectacle. Sometimes it sits quietly in a mason jar on a shelf, or at the bottom of a drawer, or tucked into the pocket of an old jacket hanging forgotten in a closet, waiting for the moment when the right pair of eyes finally falls upon it and the world changes forever. So the next time you receive change at a register, the next time you reach into a coin jar, the next time you sort through an old collection that belonged to someone you loved, look carefully. Look at the date. Look at the mint mark. Look at the details of the design, the alignment of the reverse, the feel of the planchet in your hand. Because somewhere out there, right now, there is a 1988 D-quarter, or a 1979 D, or a 1984 D, waiting to be found by someone who knows what to look for. And after today, that someone could be you. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end of today's Rare Coin Vault. This has been the most extraordinary journey through American numismatic history. And if these three coins have taught us anything, it is that the greatest treasures in this world are almost never where you expect them to be. They are hiding in plain sight, in the most ordinary places, in the most ordinary objects. And they are waiting, always waiting, for the one moment when ordinary eyes finally see something extraordinary.